apologize. I said my network bandwidth was low, so that's why it was taking so long.
Okay, so we're live on YouTube
Yeah.
now, guys. Just so you know, you're streaming to the world now.
Everyone look pretty.
Sit up straight.
My camera.
It's so great to see everyone and to see everyone's smiling faces. Yes, you too, Kevin.
So Donna, if you could just make me co-host, this is Betsy, and then I will be done.
All right, let me find you. I know you're on my list here. I'll find you. There you are. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. You're welcome. So everybody, we'll be getting started as soon as the chair logs on.
Monique is on.
I'm here.
Oh, you are?
I just can't get my camera to cooperate, but I'm here.
Do you want to pull up the agenda, Donna?
We do have a quorum, so we can go ahead and get started then.
All right, sounds good. Well, welcome everybody. I am hoping at some point I will get my camera up, just always something. Okay, so why don't I go ahead and do the roll call. And so I believe you do have to actually say here. So you have to unmute yourself and say here, okay? Okay, so Kevin Kazoil, I always say it wrong.
No, it's fine. Kojal.
Kojal.
Yep.
I
Yep.
need to write it out for me.
Yeah, it's all good. And yes, I'm here.
Okay. And then Joni Latimer.
I haven't seen her, Monique.
Okay. And Mark Murphy.
Joni Latimer is coming in the room.
Okay. I'm trying to get my view so I can see everyone, but I also can't seem to figure that out. My technology brain is broken today. Okay, so no Mark Murphy?
Not that I see.
Okay. Maria Stransky?
Present.
Hi. Okay, Barbara Seymour?
I'm here.
Hello.
Present. Hello, everybody.
And then Elizabeth Horn.
I'm here.
Yay, knew I saw you. Okay, George Worthington.
I'm here.
Hi. And did we get Joni in yet?
Yeah, sorry, I got off another call. Here I am.
No worries, hi.
Hi.
Okay, that's all I have. No, I'm so sorry. I was like, that's wrong. Please bear with me. Okay, here we are. Oh, I see what happened. This started in a weird, something is going on with my computers. I really apologize, guys. My Excel sheet was like in the middle of it. That's why you're probably wondering too why I did the names in that order. Okay, Mark Bender.
Here.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, Kara Mexner.
Here.
Mike Puglia.
Mike is on the school board meeting about reopening schools.
Okay. Ann McDonald.
Here.
Hi. Jason Young.
Hey, Monique, I'm here.
Hi. John Heath.
Here. Hi, everybody.
Hi. And Kara Beatty. Okay.
Kara, we need you to unmute.
Oh,
Thank you. Okay, Monique, you're not the only one with technical difficulties. Hi.
hi.
Thanks.
I feel like I'm forever struggling. I hit my lack of understanding of computers a long time ago, I feel. Okay. John Reynolds.
John Reynolds is also trying to reopen schools.
Okay. Sandy Parker.
I'm here.
Hi.
Hi.
Cynthia Jarmul.
Hello, I'm here.
Hey, good to see you. And Nick Rudisil.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Carson Ward. Hi. Victoria Newman.
Hello, I'm here.
Hi. Okay, Susan Moon.
Yeah, hi, Monique. I'm here.
Hi. Jean Hoyt.
Jean will not be here today.
Okay. And then Gail Brunk.
Gail is here. Gail is on childcare duty because daycare shut down, so I'm trying to get one to sleep. Sorry.
Okay, sounds good. Chris, are you here?
I am here.
Deborah Johnson.
I'm here.
Hi. Erica Lawhorn.
Here.
Okay. And then are Jeff and Jenny?
Jenny
joining
is,
today?
Jenny is here. Thanks.
Okay. And we already, so that's where I started with Kevin's awkward. Horn, George Worthington. Okay, now I believe now I've gotten everyone.
Yes, and Monique, I want to add that we have two guests with us today. So we have Marcia Dubois, our Deputy Commissioner, and Commissioner Catherine Hayfield are here too, is joining us as well. So we have two guests in addition to our staff person, Donna Cantrell.
Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us.
Hello there. Nice to be here.
Hi there.
Okay, let's see where we are now. Okay. So Chris, would you like to walk us through those electronic meeting requirements, please?
Glad to. Just a few quick reminders, and I'm sure you're all well versed in Zoom meetings. Remember, we are live streaming on YouTube, on the DARS YouTube channel. When you speak, and we're hoping that we'll get to hear all your voices today, especially in the very last part of the council meeting, please start by saying your name, so that's there for the record, or for those people who are only listening. So start by saying your name. The chat can't be seen by the public, so please don't use that for discussion. But if you're having a hard time getting your voice heard, you can use that to let us know that you have something that you want to say. Donna and I will be keeping an eye on that. Or if you're having some technical difficulties or something, use the chat for that. When you're not speaking, it's always helpful to keep yourself on mute, just so that we don't get that extra background noise. But feel free to use your cameras, because we do like seeing your smiling faces. And that's what I've got.
Thank you. Okay. So I would like to now go on to the reviewing of the proposed agenda. Does anyone, can I propose an action to approve the proposed agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Anyone to second?
This is Susan Moon. I will make the motion to second.
Thank you very much. So with that, we will go on to reviewing the previous minutes. So does anyone have any changes to the minutes from, oh, I'm sorry, am I jumping? Adopt January 24. No, I'm not. I apologize. Does anyone have any changes that need to be made to the minutes from our last meeting? Okay. With that, then would someone please propose a motion to adopt the meetings from our last, the minutes from our last meeting?
Kara Meixner, I'll move to adopt these or approve.
Thank you. We got a second.
This is Kara Beatty. I'll second that.
Thank you so much. I think, John, you might have been trying to second too, and I appreciate that. Okay. Donna, do we have any written or public comments?
No, we did not receive any public comments prior to this meeting.
All right, let me see if I can get this camera. I had one more thing I was going to try. See if it works. Am I here? Can you see me? Okay. Yay. Okay. All right. So Kara and I were going to go over some of the things we discussed in our last meeting for the person-centered approach. So I'm going to try and go through those, and then, well, Kara and I will go through those. And obviously, if myself or both of us miss something, please let us know. So we discussed a bunch of things that were to be helpful for both survivors and folks who are not survivors in the committee. And so for those who are not survivors in the committee, some of the main things that we talked about being helpful were to one of the main things that we started implementing as well last time was allowing enough time for folks to process information. So one of the ways in which we are doing that is by including some breaks in the discussion to allow people to kind of think about what was said and gather their thoughts a little bit more. So the conversation can be a little bit fast paced. So we're going to start having some breaks to allow people to think about those things. And then what's important too is when we come back from those breaks, just touching base and asking if there's anything from the discussion that we were having before the break that anyone wanted to follow up with before we get into the next point of discussion. And so we did start doing that last time, and that was helpful. So we're going to continue to implement that, as you can see on the agenda for today. And as always, we would love feedback if these things are working really well, or if we think that, the timing isn't quite right, just let us know. And the goal is to kind of continue to tweak this until it's, really perfect for us. And that might mean it's going to change over time with different members. So avoiding acronyms. So we struggle with this all the time, and just kind of another reminder to avoid those acronyms. And I think all of us voiced that it's confusing for us. So this is not an issue, as many of these are actually. I say that these are things that are helpful for the survivors, but they're helpful for all of us. So I should say these are things that are helpful for people with brains. So just to kind of avoid those acronyms and then also kind of avoid these like industry terms, so if we're talking about, if we're going over research, if we're going over, things related to like fiscal stuff, just making sure that we're not using terms that, while they're super familiar to us, may not be familiar to others, or at least kind of saying, when I say this, I'm talking about blah, blah, blah. And also just doing that, obviously, right? So the other big thing was one person at a time and one topic at a time. So we can often kind of get into this thing where we're riffing off other people. And so to be sure that we're not doing that, because that can get confusing. And sometimes one topic will make one of us think of something else. And so we'll start talking about that topic. And what's best to do in that case is probably just make a note for yourself. And then when that topic has kind of died down, then kind of say, when we were talking about that, it made me think about this thing. And I'm thinking these two are connected and here's how. And then on that point of kind of taking notes, that'll be helpful for everyone. If writing things down or typing things out or whatever is a way that helps you keep track, go ahead and do that, because during those breaks, you can kind of look at all the things you wrote down and say, okay, now how do I want to kind of actually put this together into a question or into a response to what people were saying. The other thing is to make sure that we're providing really clear directives for everyone. So not just kind of saying, we want you guys to review this thing and look it over, let us know what you think. We need to look at this document, and specifically, we're looking to see how point A in this document will relate to our outreach programs in this region. So just being really specific with what we need in terms of any kind of asks that we make of folks in the committee. So I think those were the main ones that were kind of under our ideas of things for folks in the council who are not survivors to be mindful of. Kara, anything else with that chunk? We might have maybe having some technical difficulties, but she will catch back up. Okay. So then for survivors, I think to me, one of the main things is going to be to, and again, these are geared towards the survivors, but I think this is important for all of us. Be very vocal about what your needs are. So if pace is an issue for you, speaking with someone, and Donna is a great person to speak with, obviously, always reach out to me, reach out to Kara. But speaking to someone whomever it is that you feel very comfortable speaking with on council and letting them know, it's difficult for me to keep up with the pace of things. And so I'm wondering what I can do about that, or what might be helpful for me with that, or here's what I think would be helpful. Is there a way that we could implement that? And then also this focus on the things that you're good at. So if you know that one thing you're really, really good at is putting together different ideas after the fact, then kind of say, I might be sending you guys an email 2 or 3 days later where I'm really synthesizing a lot of what was discussed. And that would be really helpful. And maybe you're seeing things in a way that others didn't, but just kind of know what you're really good at and put that foot forward. Don't stress yourself out with trying to do things that are not as easy for you to do, or don't come as naturally for you to do. And maybe with time they will, but again, just there's no point in stressing yourself out. And okay, being prepared. So that is another big one. So information is sent out ahead of time. So really making use of that information that's sent out to you. Look over the agenda, kind of see what the talking points are going to be for the meeting, and think to yourself, what might I want to say on this topic? So that you aren't feeling like, maybe the conversation jumped in and you're constantly treading water trying to keep up, but you have your own ideas before that conversation starts about what you might want to say and how you might want to chip in. And to that point, it might be good for you, even though it can be difficult or awkward for a lot of people to start a conversation when a topic is brought up. If you have those things kind of written down, just say, I'm going to be the first one to talk about this. That way I won't get lost in that shuffle of people saying things, or someone else won't say my idea. And then I'll feel like I thought of this and I wrote it down and I didn't get to say it. And then also taking your own breaks. So we will do the breaks, but if you need a break at a different time, if things are, kind of becoming overwhelming to you, you just want to step out so you're not hearing all these different ideas coming at you, take a break. Go, now we're all at our homes and stuff. But I was saying, when we meet together physically, it's always, you can step outside and get a breath of fresh air. You can still obviously do that at your home, but kind of just giving yourself a little minute, take a little break, and everyone will completely understand, just turn your camera off and we'll get that you're just not available at that moment. So doing that kind of stuff to care for yourself. And then kind of follow up with us as well, or follow up again with whomever you're comfortable with. If anything became uncomfortable for you during a meeting, giving that feedback, or having someone that you can reach out to after meetings. If you're saying, I'm finding that these meetings sometimes are difficult for me because it makes me think about my trauma, or it makes me think about, when my loved one first went through their trauma and what we went through, and that's really difficult for me. Having a friend or someone you can reach out to and say, these meetings are tough. So is it okay if we do a Zoom coffee chat after these meetings, or, something like that. So being mindful too of just your own mental health with this group. And then finally, kind of this recognition of when it's more appropriate to share elements of your story and when it's not. And that also will go into kind of being mindful of what might be troubling or difficult or triggering for other folks. So kind of being mindful of that and how you describe, your trauma or your difficulties. So I think, even though I realize I said that too quickly because I'm looking at my list that I wrote out, so I wasn't really being as person-centered with that. But any questions? And is Kara back? Did she have any additional thoughts on that? I'm not even seeing. Where is she?
Monique, it's possible that something was going on and she's just now calling in. So that's what we're trying to figure out.
Okay. So again, that was a lot of information. We are going to just kind of slowly let that sink in while folks think if there's anything that they too have thought about over the last couple of months that they think would be helpful that they wanted to add.
Hello, Nick Rudiso. Is slow down a key? Is a lot of the questions is realized is good. Information is slow down key. Thank you.
Okay. I could feel him slapping my hand. I'm just playing. Anyone else have any other thoughts or feedback?
I'm not sure if you all can hear me. This is Kara Meixner. My internet went down in my home, so I'm calling in a phone. So I missed about 5 minutes and wanted just to say I'm here and I apologize.
No, we got you. We're glad you're back. Kara, I basically went over like the list, but I'm wondering if there were ways in which you wanted to embellish that or things that you thought needed to be said in a different way or added. I know you didn't hear all of it.
No, I heard a little bit at the end and heard Nick's comment. Thank you so much, Nick, for sharing the importance of pacing. That's something I think for all of us that would be helpful throughout the meeting. I like the idea of taking the breaks and just making sure that we pause. I think that's what I would add.
Any
Monique,
thoughts? Yeah.
This is Chris Miller. Ann McDonald got some nice feedback from Kelly Lang, who helped facilitate this whole discussion. Would it be all right if Ann shared that feedback?
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, I was talking to Kelly about something completely unrelated, and she responded in an email that she had been holding Monique and the Brain Injury Council, the Virginia Brain Injury Council, up as a shining example to her other NCAP participants. NCAP is the National Collaborative for Advancing Person something or other, but it's the group that she's working with on these person-centered practices. And what she was so complimentary is about was us taking the suggestions that had been provided and using them in real time, immediately instituting the breaks and trying to slow down and simplify our language. But she watched us do that in real time as a result of her presentation. And so she's been talking us up.
Yay.
And it was very complimentary of the chair, and I concur.
Thank you. It's very helpful stuff. So I wish I had done better at being slow with my own presentation just then. But I think to that, I'm wondering, do people have kind of concrete ideas to help folks who do tend to go kind of quickly, ways to slow down?
George, so Zoom has new reactions that you can use, including one that says slow down. So maybe people can use that.
Yeah.
One way.
Thank you. That's a great idea.
So George, this is Chris Miller. George, thank you. To get to those, if you click on participants, it will pull up a list of everyone, and down at the bottom, it can say, that's where you can find the go slower one. So if anyone needs that, thanks, George.
One of the things that I've always sort of employed is remembering that groups like this need far less detail than I can give. And I need to be very, very cognizant of that. Just because I'm in the weeds doesn't mean everybody else needs to be. And so once you think about that and can adjust your language and your own thought processes accordingly, it's just easier to slow down. The word is decomplicate. So just decomplicate, and that makes things go a little slower. And monitor your own pace of speech, which any good speech language pathologist will tell you is key.
Okay, this is Monique again. So I'm also mindful that we are scheduled for a break. So I'm wondering if we can go ahead and take that and kind of use that also to think back over some of this stuff and see if anyone has anything that comes to them over that break about kind of the person-centered approach and other ways in which folks would like to see us implement that beyond the breaks and trying to slow down and not using the acronyms, et cetera, if there's more concrete things that anyone wants us to implement. So it looks like it is 1:30. So why don't we plan on being back here at 1:40? Okay, see you guys soon. All right, everyone, this is Monique Wilson. Welcome back. It is 1:40. So to start things back off, did anyone have any additional ideas or thoughts regarding the person-centered approach that they would like to share with us?
So Monique, I have a question, especially because I'm getting ready to present. So I need to keep all these ideas in mind. When it comes to acronyms, I use quite a few. But what I was intending to do is the first time I use an acronym, I would say out what it stands for. And then subsequently, I would just start using that acronym. But I'm wondering, for people who really are unfamiliar with these acronyms, if it wouldn't be more helpful to just continually use the longer version, unless we want to use the chat box, maybe as a way to indicate what those acronyms stand for once they're used. I'm just wondering what the best way to approach that would be.
Yeah. So this is Monique speaking. I think it might be better to continue to say them, but that's my initial thought. I think folks could kind of write them down as well, but then they'd have to be looking back and trying to keep up with it in that way. What do other folks think?
I agree with you, Monique. And I think in addition, Elizabeth, when the first time you use an acronym, it may be helpful to some of the survivors if you kind of explain what that is. If you're talking about DMAS or whatever you're talking about, explain what that organization does and how it fits into the first time you use it, how it fits into what we're talking about.
I can try. Yeah.
Some of the names are confusing.
Sure. Okay.
I think that was a great idea, John. I think that'll be great. So let's try it. We'll see. This is we can't do anything wrong, right? We'll just adjust it. So if it's not working one way, we'll keep tweaking things. But let's try that and see how that goes.
Hi, this is Victoria. I just wanted to mention something real brief. Donna Cantrell helps with providing pre-meetings, and that's very helpful, just to go over, agenda items and things like that prior to the meeting. So I just wanted to mention that that's always available, and it's something that I myself benefit from before each meeting. So I think that's something well worth noting.
Thank you, Victoria. And thank you, Donna. Okay.
So actually, I'm sorry, Monique. One thing that I wanted to just, I guess, agree with John and with Elizabeth is that was one thing Kelly Lang said when she was doing her facilitation last week, that, she knows what DARS is, but, she doesn't remember it, on the spot every time. So yeah, I think the longer names are probably helpful just based on what Kelly said at the last meeting.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This is Barbara.
Barbara, hi.
I just wanted to say I agree. I think we all get caught up in using these acronyms and talking in ABCs. And it just takes up more time for the person to try to remember what it stands for, and then you might lose something as the conversation continues. So I think that's a good idea. And then the people that are taking notes or whatever, they can come up with their own personal acronym that will mean more to them because they came up with it. unless you're like me and come up with one and go, what did I mean by that? But anyway, I think that way it's more safe for everybody.
And I'll add one more thing, being the occupational therapist that I am, I think we do have acronym sheets, and I'm going to encourage everybody to use the strategies that are available to you. Because, you know, that's part of participating in a group. It's coming prepared as well. And so that should be an expectation too, that we have strategies. We use Donna, we use acronym sheets and that sort of thing.
Thank you. That's a very good point as well.
This is Gail. I'm wondering if everybody has access to one of those acronym sheets, and if not, maybe that's something that could be sent out prior to the next meeting. I know on my board minutes, I think my board member stole it from the Silk, the sheet that has all the acronyms, and he puts that in every board minutes. So just making sure everybody has that tool available if we're going to ask people to use it.
Great. This is Chris. Gail, thank you so much. We will make that a regular part of the mailing, and we'll update the acronym list based on whatever new ones we gather at each meeting, and we'll start sending that out. So,
actually, I have a question about that, Chris. Well, for all of you, I guess. The acronym list that we have right now is long. Would it be helpful, and everyone should have gotten one of those during the initial orientation that you attended, but would it be more helpful as I'm preparing everything for these meetings to do an individual acronym list that's specific to that meeting? I mean, if we're not going to be talking about DMAS at the next meeting, the Department of Medical Assistant Services, maybe that one doesn't need to go on the list for that meeting. But if we're going to be talking about the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, DBHDS, or Developmental Services, that one should go on the list. Does that make sense? Maybe be meeting specific, or the whole thing every time?
This is Monique. I'm sorry, go ahead, John. Nick, I'm sorry.
Yes, acronyms is all right, is a lot of questions is yes, definitely space is thank you.
Okay, so are you saying you would prefer the shorter list that's meeting specific?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Barbara again. I think maybe sending the overall one just to have it as a resource, because sometimes in the meetings, an acronym may come up that's not initially planned in the meeting, so to speak. So people could still use it as a reference, even though it's long, or even just to have, on standby, so to speak. But I like your idea of keeping it meeting specific.
hi, this is Barbara. This is Chris. I'm wondering if we have a master list and we highlight the ones that will be we anticipate will be used in the coming meeting. Nick, Veronica, Victoria, would that be of help if we have a master list and we highlight the ones that would be used?
Yes, I'd like yes.
This is Victoria. I agree. It would be great to have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is Monique. I feel like we can move on to Susan's presentation of the recommendations for new members. A very exciting presentation of that.
Yeah, hi, everybody. So I get to follow that very practical, wonderful conversation about how to do this well. And so can everybody hear me? Can somebody wave or thumbs up? Cool. All right, good. Hopefully I won't run into any weird challenges computer wise. And so, yeah, I tried to practice. So many years ago, I talk too much and I tend to say too much. And so I try to practice and write notes. And so I was diligently trying to streamline this down and had forgotten that Donna had also done the same thing for our meeting today. And so, yeah, we'll try and simplify our little presentation here as much as we can. But first, before I do that, I really kind of want to thank everyone who made nominations or encouraged people to nominate themselves. I mean, I think this is my maybe third year on the committee and my second year chairing it. And I think we had 15 nominations. And it's just so exciting. The interest and the energy and the variety of nominations. It was really lovely. So, you know, I know there had to have been a good bit of energy put into gathering those. And so on behalf of the committee and the council, I just really want to thank you guys who did that legwork. It was lovely to read all of the bios and so forth. So round of applause to all of you in that regard. The committee did review every one of the applications. And we discussed in detail, not so much the people, but the kind of needs of the council, the mission of the council. We tried to keep diversity and equity and experience and all of those things in mind. And in the end, primarily, our goal to really focus and be as inclusive as we could in adding survivors to the council. So ultimately, when we finish here today, we will be talking about adding a survivor to the council through the commissioner's ability to add someone for us, for the council. So that all being said, thank you. And I'll just review really briefly here what the three positions are. They're on your screen so you can read them. I won't read all of this, of course. But for the first position, it's one person has to be a survivor, a family member or a representative of a person with a brain injury. And I think it might be smart just to look then at position one, which is on your screen. And so there were 5 people nominated. And the committee discussed in detail lots of, like I said, demographics and organizational characteristics of the nominees. We looked at regions. And we actually would like to put forth to this committee that Nick Rudisil serve in this position for a second term due to his past experience on the council. And we have benefited greatly, even today, Nick's contributions that he has brought here to the council over his first term. So for position one, we're putting forth Nick to all of you to kind of affirm in the slate that will go to Commissioner Hayfield. Donna, can you go back up? Oh, no, it's there. Okay. And so the second position that we need to fill is for a person who must be a survivor, a family member or a representative of a person with a brain injury. And so one of the two positions for 1 and 2 of these first 2 had to be a survivor. And Nick actually does fulfill that role of having to be a survivor. And so for position number 2, we had 6 nominations and of family members, and 3 where we brought in the remaining survivor nominations. So we considered 9 folks, 9 really great candidates for the council. And we really started to focus our conversation on increasing survivor participation. And the council would like to put forth to you all today, Kelly Lang. And so you all know, and we've just talked about the wonderful contribution Kelly's already made in our last meeting to helping us be more mindful and person-centered. And so we would like to put her forth to join the council officially. She is a family member and a person living with a brain injury. So we're very excited to put her forth as a member of the council. And then that brings us to the third position that we have, which is one that must be filled by someone who is not employed by an organization that is funded by state general funds. And so what that means is that they have to work for an organization that is not receiving monies from the Virginia Commonwealth state budget of general funds. Just to kind of build that out a little. We did get 4 nominations for this position. And other people that had been nominated in other categories, we did shift them down if they met this definition, so that we were sure that we gave everybody maximum opportunity to participate and be nominated. And so the committee would like to put forth Amber Walter to serve in this position. So Ms. Walter's employed at Sheltering Arms Institute. She has extensive knowledge in continuum of care, in physical rehab, and I think important, both inpatient and outpatient settings, knowledge of translation research, physical therapy, and advocacy in government affairs. So she brings a lot of well-rounded experience. And so the committee is putting her forth for the council's consideration for the slate to fill those official positions. So we'll summarize this at the end, but maybe I should just stop here and see if anybody had any questions about those 3 official positions. And I can lean on Chris and Donna to help answer those questions. Let's just take a minute. I don't see anybody waving their hand. I don't want to move too quickly, but okay. So you'll have more opportunity for questions if you think of one before we finish. So the 4th position, sort of unofficial position, but DARS, the Department for Aging Resources, has the opportunity, and this commission, this council has the opportunity to offer a designee to Commissioner Hayfield to add to our council. And so the committee went through all of the candidates nominated, and we would like to recommend that the council put forth a 4th member on the slate to ask the commissioner to appoint Patrick Sandus, I think I'm saying that right, it's Sandus, to serve in this position. And so Dr. Sandus received a traumatic brain injury. He is a survivor in 2011 as a consequence of a bicycling accident, and consequently has a lot of personal experience with inpatient and outpatient rehab. He's familiar with a number of the facilities in Virginia and in Georgia, the Shepherd Center. He's currently serving on the governor-appointed Commonwealth Neurotrauma Initiative Trust Fund Advisory Board. So we really thank him as a Commonwealth for participating on that advisory board, but that term will end in June, And we'd like to invite him to join our council and bring his experience to us and the council so we can, continue our work in providing more resources for folks with brain injuries and their support system. So we are putting forth Dr. Sandus also on this slate to send up to the commissioner. And so the summary here at the end, we have a little summary here, and that wraps this all up. And the committee is that your nominations committee is recommending this full slate of candidates to be voted upon here to send to the commissioner. They would each serve a 3-year term on the Brain Injury Council. Their term would begin at our meeting in April of 2021. And so we're putting forth Nick Rudisil as a survivor, Kelly Lang as a survivor and a family member, Amber Walter as a professional, not employed by a state-funded agency, and Dr. Sandus as a survivor and would be serving as our commissioner's designee. And so I propose that to all of you for consideration.
This is John Heath. I'd like to thank Susan and her committee for their hard work on this, and I make a motion we accept this slate in its entirety.
This is Sandy. I'll second.
Okay, Monique, the floor is yours, I think.
Madam Chair, would you like to ask for any discussion before we call the vote?
Sorry, trying to unmute. Sorry, that was really exciting to me. I do want to allow just another moment for anyone if they did have any questions or anything about the slate. So just allow another couple minutes or another minute or so, especially if anyone has any questions. Not to say that they don't approve of the slate, but just any questions.
Madam Chairperson, this is Kathy Hayfield, Commissioner. I want to thank the committee for their work on this. And I also think it's just fabulous that there were so many nominations. That is not the norm. We usually grovel for people to participate on boards and councils. And so I really give you all a lot of credit for reaching out and finding folks who were interested. I think you've come up with a great slate. So thank you, Susan, for your leadership there as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any last thoughts?
Hi, this is Kara. I just wanted to echo the commissioner's comments and extend my gratitude to the committee for welcoming such a robust and diverse pool of candidates. And thank you for your leadership.
Anyone else? Okay, I think we have our new members. No? I thought we had a motion and a second.
Monique, we've got a first and a second, so now you need to do a roll call vote.
Oh, I'm sorry, guys.
That's okay. It's only on the agenda and the minutes that we can do it just by consensus. This requires a roll call vote.
Okay, let me pull up my. Something seemed too easy, right?
Right. I'm going to sign off. Thank you all.
Thank you for being here.
Signing off.
Okay. All right, Mark Bender.
I vote in favor.
Okay. Kara. Meixner, sorry.
Okay, I just wanted to double check.
Sorry.
This is Kara Meixner, favor.
Thank you. And Mike's not here. Ann McDonald?
Yes. Yes.
I'm forgetting, is Jason here? Jason Young?
He is, and I vote in favor.
Thank you.
Hey Monique, this is Mike Puglia. Sorry, I'm here now. Apologize. I vote in favor.
Yay, okay. John Heath?
Yes, I vote yes.
Okay. And then Kara Beatty?
I vote in favor.
John Reynolds? I thought John was here. Did I? No, he wasn't. Okay. And Sandy?
I vote in favor.
Thank you. Cynthia? I thought Cynthia was here. Okay. Nick?
Yes.
Carson? I know Victoria's here.
I vote yes.
Okay. Susan?
Yes.
Okay. Jean? Gail?
Jean's not here.
Okay, yeah, Gail. I didn't really take notes of who wasn't here. I apologize, guys. But I do think Gail's here, right?
Yes. My response is yes.
Okay.
Favor.
And Chris?
Yes.
Was Deborah here? Is Deborah here?
Yes, and I'm in favor.
Okay. Erica?
Yes, in favor.
Jenny?
Yes, in favor.
Kevin?
Yes.
Joni?
Yes.
Mark?
In favor.
Maria?
Agree.
And Barbara?
Yes.
Elizabeth?
In favor.
And George. Was George here?
Yes, I'm in favor.
And then do I vote too? I'm in favor. Okay. I think I got everyone. I didn't hear
So this
any
is Chris.
no's.
So this is Chris. Thank you. What you have just done then is this slate will go to, Donna will forward this slate to the commissioner for her approval. She just indicated to you that she does support it. And then the commissioner will send letters to these individuals letting them know of their appointments, and they will join us at the next meeting. And I want to commend you on, adding three survivors and continuing to grow the voices of our primary stakeholders. Thank you all so much.
Okay. Pull back up my agenda. We have the disability law. Okay, so Elizabeth Horn is going to present from Disability Law Center.
Okay. Thank you, Monique. And thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. I really appreciate this opportunity to present to the council. Again, I'm Elizabeth Horn, and I'm a senior disability rights advocate for the Disability Law Center of Virginia. I'm going to try and be very mindful of keeping a reasonable pace to this presentation. I will try hard to present the acronyms and say them out. I may skip a few or forget along the way, but I will do my best with that to honor what we're trying to accomplish here. So since we have some new members to the council, the Disability Law Center of Virginia, or DLCV, is Virginia's designated protection and advocacy organization for people with disabilities. And just to be clear, every state has one of these, and this is Virginia's. So we're independent of state and local government, and we're federally funded primarily, which includes a small grant for traumatic brain injury, or TBI. And this grant is managed through the Administration on Community Living, or ACL. Next slide. So because we're federally funded, our services for people with disabilities, of course, including those with brain injury, are generally free. Our services consist of information and referral, otherwise known as INR. And for this, we use subject matter experts. And we have probably, 30 subject matter experts on a wide range of disability-related topics. It also includes short-term or technical assistance, where we use advocates to help people solve problems, or of course, legal representation using attorneys. We also monitor facilities such as group homes, assisted living facilities, and state hospitals, as well as the voting precincts to ensure access to the polls. And of course, we conduct systemic advocacy to improve the service delivery system. And with this, we have a focus on strengthening community-based options while addressing issues of abuse, neglect, perhaps discrimination. And the overarching goal is to really advance the rights of individuals with disabilities in terms of self-determination. Next slide, please. Next slide.
Hold on, I'm trying. It's not advanced. There you go.
Okay. So what is the pathway to getting help at the Disability Law Center of Virginia? Typically, someone calls our main number listed there in the slide, and they're going to be routed to our information and referral specialist, who creates a service request and then refers it to the appropriate subject matter expert. Sometimes the call can require one or more subject matter experts, so we make sure that all issues are being addressed. This advocate then also provides the customized information and referral and determines if we have an objective that could address their concerns more specifically and perhaps at a much deeper level. And so in that case, another case is opened and then assigned to the appropriate advocate or attorney. So this is where the short-term or maybe the technical assistance can be provided around specific issues such as guardianship, perhaps special education, abuse, neglect, and so on. Currently, we are actually seeking cases involving traumatic brain injury and ADA violations, ADA being the Americans with Disabilities Act, and also where there may be a Medicaid waiver denial. And so we're looking to help in those instances. Now, I serve as the subject matter expert for traumatic brain injury, as well as Social Security. And so, I'm often the point person for issues concerning brain injury, and often I see the systemic issues playing out. Now, another pathway to help is through our projects. Projects can address a whole range of things. They can investigate an issue. Perhaps, for example, last year, I had an investigation where I was looking at veterans who also had a traumatic brain injury, and the extent to which they were able to receive services in their communities for behavioral or substance abuse disorders. So that was a project. But then we also had a project, another one that I'm responsible for, where I provide Social Security consultations to our state-funded programs and their case managers. This is where a case manager working with a client who may have a problem accessing these critical Social Security benefits. And because that's my area of expertise, I can get involved and help them with that issue to remove the barrier. And they know how to reach out to me, so they would not necessarily have to go through our main number. Okay, next slide. So mainly today, my goal is to present some of our most recent case successes, and I think this will give you a feel for the kinds of things we can do for folks. We also want to share with you what some of our systemic priorities are. And I would like to mention too that all of our goals and focus areas are published on our website. And I have the URL for that listed, or the web page listed. You can click on it, I believe, or go to it and read those for yourself. Our brain injury objectives are actually embedded in those goals and focus areas. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so starting with a few of our most recent successes. First of all, I want to mention that I have the honor every year of producing our report for our traumatic brain injury grant, federal grant. And so I get to read all the wonderful things that have been done by our advocates and attorneys for people with brain injuries. So it's real hard to narrow down just a few examples, but I've done my best here, again, to give you a flavor of what we can do for folks. So what we do also in these reports is we try and humanize what we're doing by giving the situation a title. So in this case, this first case, I call it Opening Doors to College Success. Now, what happened here is that a young woman with a brain injury was accepted to one of Virginia's state universities. She uses a mobility device and she needed an accessible campus. When she arrived, she found that the automatic doors and elevators did not work. So she called the Disability Law Center immediately, and an advocate went to the campus immediately to investigate and was able to confirm that the otherwise accessible equipment was in disrepair. So the advocate spoke with the appropriate campus officials and was able to remind them of their ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act, responsibilities, and the repairs were made quickly. And so she and others with mobility impairments could access the campus and she could proceed with her education. The next one I call Neglect Became the Norm for Norm. Now, obviously that wasn't his name, but this story involves a young man who is a resident at a long-term care facility due to the effects of his severe traumatic brain injury, which required significant staff assistance in meeting his daily needs. He had both physical and also communication needs. So concerned family and friends reported to us that the facility was not meeting his needs. Specifically, they were ignoring his call button and leaving him in soiled clothing. They also failed to give him opportunities to leave his room unless a loved one happened to come by. So a disability law center advocate went to the facility and investigated these concerns and found them to be credible. They worked with staff to improve his care and correct this neglect. And now he has a greater quality of life. The next story involves a young boy, and I called it, It's All About the Classroom Supports. So this involved a young boy of 9 years old, and his mother reached out to us. He'd had a brain injury, and she was seeking in-school support for her son. She feared that his school was simply focusing on pushing him through, and she did not believe her son was learning. And the school was actually discussing removing him altogether because the teacher said she couldn't handle him. So the Disability Law Center advocate attended an individualized education plan, or IEP, meeting with the school and with the individual, the student, and the parent. And they were able to secure a 504 plan for accommodations and advocate for a behavior intervention plan, which made all the difference. So moving forward, he now has the classroom supports he needs to succeed. This last example is called 52-year-old proves disability began before age 22. Now that title may give some of you a clue as to what this is about, but try proving that a disability happened 30 years ago. What happened here is a mother called the Disability Law Center. Often it is the caretaker reaching out, right? And she was calling to request help in obtaining a developmental disability, or otherwise known as DD, waiver for her 53-year-old or 52-year-old son who lives with a very large and inoperable brain tumor. He had experienced a recent psychiatric hospitalization for aggressive behaviors due directly to this tumor growing in his brain. And then when discharged, he was placed temporarily at a REACH residential crisis program. But he would not have been able to stay there indefinitely because it was strictly temporarily. And what that meant was without this DD, or developmental disability waiver, he would probably have ended up in some kind of a state hospital or other probably very restrictive setting. So his mom attempted to qualify him for a developmental disability, or DD waiver, based on the surgeon saying that this tumor was likely growing since adolescence. And therefore, that there was probably a significant connection between this brain tumor and the things that were happening as an adolescent that were disabling to him. He had terrible headaches. He dropped out of school at 16. He was unable to work. And so, unfortunately, the application for this waiver was denied. However, the agency agreed to re-review his condition and see if they could add any new evidence that would support that his disability began before the age of 22, which is the critical eligibility requirement for this waiver. And incidentally, for those of you unfamiliar with waivers, waivers provide a whole range of services in the community or in one's home, as opposed to, or as an alternative to them being in some kind of an institutional setting. Okay, that's a brief description of that. So that's about when the Disability Law Center got involved, is at the time he was denied this waiver.
Is it just me, or is Elizabeth freezing up for everyone?
Yeah, she froze up.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't hear her.
Elizabeth, I don't know if you can hear us, but you've frozen on our screens. I'm trying to send her a message.
I'm glad you asked, Chris, because I thought, oh goodness, now I've lost my phone, not just my internet.
Okay, Elizabeth got bumped out of the meeting.
Yeah,
So,
she's rejoining.
She's rejoining, okay.
She just logged out. She'll be rejoining in a second.
Thanks, Erica.
I'm glad she
Monique,
took the, this
Go
is
ahead,
John
John.
Heath. Yeah, I'm glad she took the time to explain waivers. And I would ask any of the survivors or maybe caregivers who haven't heard about waivers before, if they have any other questions about what a waiver is and what it does, because we've got several people here who are very versed on what waivers are.
Nick, I'll call, Great, yeah, is new, is social worker, is good, is 10 years ago is nothing. 5 years ago is a little bit, is waivers is explain is specifics. Also slide frees up slide is also sorry.
Chris, you're on mute.
All right, let me try this again. This is Chris Miller. Monique, we have a break scheduled for right after this. Do you think, should we take the break now and give Elizabeth time to get back in and resettled?
Yes, that's a really good idea. So it is 2:27 on my clock. So we'll meet back at 2:37. Oh,
Great.
2:38. It just changed.
Liz is coming back in now.
I am so sorry. So our
Elizabeth?
There we go. Oh, yeah.
Elizabeth, this is Chris. We decided to go ahead and take a break and let you get back in. So we're going to restart at 2:38.
Got it. Okay. And again, I am so sorry. Our internet went out.
No problem.
Our
Can't
home
control those
internet,
kinds of
and I know. So my son helped me get it going as soon as we were able. So
Yeah,
great.
technology is great until it's not, right?
What's that?
Technology is great until it's not.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, is my audio okay? Because I want to make sure I'm, yeah, okay.
Your audio is okay, and as soon as we come back, I'll put your slide back up where we were, and we'll get started again.
Okay. Thank you.
Donna, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Kara, she may have stepped away. Is there something I can help you with?
Oh, yes, I just wanted to let you know, my son just let me know that our internet is back on again. So I'm going to reconnect attempt to reconnect. But I think what I'm going to do is keep the phone on mute just in case.
No problem.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. It was 8, not 6. I apologize. 2 minutes. Okay, my clock is saying 2:38, so I believe it is time for us to get back to Elizabeth's presentation.
Oh, boy. I am so sorry for that.
No worries.
I think that Donna is going to go ahead and put the PowerPoint back up. There we go. I know you're all on the edge of your seat wondering what's happened to this wonderful gentleman. And she's going to move on down to what I think is slide 5. So basically, what happened here is that, you know, we had no objective evidence of disability prior to age 22. There were no MRIs back 30 years ago. There were no school records, but we were able to develop a very compelling social history through this mother's testimony to be added to some refined physician letters that better drew the connection between this brain tumor that clearly was growing and impairing back prior to age 22, actually in his adolescence. And so together with that new evidence that was submitted, the agency was able to quickly reverse their decision and approve this individual for a developmental disability waiver. So now, instead of being in an institutional setting, he can reside in a group home nearby his family. Incidentally, just very briefly, the way these waivers work is that we have the Department of Medical Assistance Services that provides the funding for these. And then we have the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services that provides the service. So often these applications can get complicated. So anyway, that was another one of our successes. So moving, Donna, to slide 6. What I want to move to is to talk a little bit about our systemic priorities. Let's see. Yeah, I guess this is, yes, thank you. Okay, so what I would recommend is that at some other time, you can go to our online traumatic brain injury resource page. I have provided the web address for that here. And this has been newly revised and updated, and it's a very, I would say, fairly comprehensive piece of sort of INR, or information and maybe referral around all of the things that are going on in brain injury in Virginia. It also includes a complete listing of the DARS state-funded brain injury programs, for example. It includes contact information for DARS and Brain Injury Services and the Brain Injury Association. It mentions the council. So it's a great web page. And right up at the top of that web page, you'll see our publications that we have done on brain injury since about 2015. And just to quickly point out, the first two are reports. One is a lengthy report, which provides a lot of background, maybe 30 years of background on the system of services for brain injury and how they developed and what it took to get case management or supportive employment or some of the things that we now almost take for granted that we have on a statewide basis. But it also talks extensively about these enormous gaps that remain in the system, having to do with access to mental health, access to waivers, not having sufficient community-based services, and so forth. And in combination, these things result in really oftentimes terrible outcomes for people, which we've all written about and read about. The second report is an abbreviation of that first report, and it was submitted to the members of the General Assembly back in 2016. We have tried to continually educate the members of the Assembly about the needs of individuals with brain injuries. In 2018 and 2019, we prepared what we call infographics or pictures of the problem with some text that describe it very succinctly. We know members of the General Assembly typically have about a 10-second attention span, and so we have to really get at the issue. So anyway, these are documents that you may be interested in going back to. They really, kind of repeat what we already know, but it's sort of an affirmation of the problem. Next slide. Incidentally, some of these other reports that have been in circulation since also around 2015, I do want to point some of them out because they were so spot on. And of course, Kara Mixner is here, and she was the author of one of them out of James Madison University, the study on access to neurobehavioral services. We also had a very significant report by the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, also known as JLARC, and the Joint Commission on Healthcare, or JCHC, did a compelling report as well. So all of these reports together unequivocally cite insufficient community-based services or access to neurobehavioral services, and a system really that mostly by default results in people with brain injury ending up in the most restrictive environments, such as our state mental hospitals, even out-of-state brain injury programs, the prison system, and homelessness. This happens every day here in Virginia still. So anyway, these consistently unmet needs have also been cited in, of course, our council's annual priorities letter to the commissioner. And of course, we just went through that last fall, and they cited all of the issues we're talking about here as well. And so through the Brain Injury Association of Virginia and the Alliance of Providers and many stakeholders, we've really had consistent and formidable advocacy efforts that have communicated this message over and over again, what these gaps are. And there have been gains made, even recently. There was a new appropriation a year or two ago for additional case management slots. And so that was significant. But despite these significant efforts, it just seems that traumatic brain injury constituency continues to suffer from the small kid on the block syndrome. They're still seen as a low incident population. And, when its needs are compared to the giant budget requests from mental health or developmental disability, which to be fair, are also underfunded. And now with COVID-19 as a priority, it seems that brain injury continues to get the short end of the stick, at least in terms of these, budget appropriations and so on. So DLCV in its systemic priorities is trying to consider some trickle-up methods to impact the system, to complement the trickle-down approach. I think of the legislative approach as trickle-down. Those methods seem, for those systemic changes, still seem so far off. We don't even have a traumatic brain injury waiver in Virginia yet, and no telling when that will come about. But what can we do now to shore up the system? That's really what we're focused on. So I have here a few things that we've come up with that we think can be prioritized and worked on. The first is to ensure that individuals with brain injury receive timely case management. And secondly, that they are referred for available waivers, as well as services like REACH, which are really can be very useful for a young person who's having some behavioral concerns or a crisis. And then we need to ensure that individuals with brain injury with behavioral health needs are being served by the Department of Health and Developmental Services, or DBHDS, and their system of community service boards, otherwise referred to as CSBs. And they have a wonderful system of crisis services, core services involving housing, counseling, their own case management, and so forth. So together, we think that these three things will partially address this longstanding, what's also called is the neurobehavioral gap, service gap. We think that, these things can really help people live in more community-based settings and receive more community-based services. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to mention briefly what these three priorities are in a little bit more depth. With timely case management, we all recognize that we don't have enough of it. And the problem seems to be twofold. Some of the programs in Virginia have wait lists. I'm referring to the state-funded brain injury programs. Some at times can be as long as a year or two wait list. And then there are some communities that are unserved. And of course, the Brain Injury Association of Virginia and the Alliance of Providers, and certainly the council, recognize that case management is so key to accessing vital supports. It came out again in the priorities letter. Past legislative bills have, as I've just mentioned, have resulted in increased appropriations for this, but still we still need more, more and more. And this session, in the 2021 General Assembly session, we have some bills that are promoting base funding to retain existing staff, which is very important, and also, again, to have enough money to hire new staff for the programs or in areas where we have no services, and even the programs we have who need more case managers. I think one of the things that the Disability Law Center would encourage is that we consider ways or find ways to diversify the funding for this case management, since it's such a critical service. And maybe not to be quite so dependent on state appropriations, because of all of the needs that are clamoring for our state budget. And so anyway, if we can do this, we think timely case management, once again, can proactively address some of these neurobehavioral problems that get created when people's needs aren't met early on. It's just basic early intervention. Next slide. Okay, and then we do want to, again, ensure that individuals are being referred for these available home and community-based services waivers, or HCBS. These are waivers mainly provided by Medicaid, Department of Medical Assistance Services, or DMAS, and also such services as REACH, which I'll explain in a moment. And we've heard through our casework mainly that there are instances where people are not being referred for these waivers by the traumatic brain injury case managers. And we're wondering if it's a training issue, and if we need to find ways to develop more extensive trainings around waivers, and just make sure that every case manager is highly skilled in how to access and utilize these critical waivers that are available. They're not going to be available for all their clients, but for a select number, they will be and need to be used. For example, CCC Plus is a wonderful waiver, no regard to diagnosis, no age restriction, and it provides nursing home level care, but in the home, which is critical. Then we have these developmental disability waivers, and I've pointed out a case in point, and these provide a wide range of community supports, which can even include housing, but because they're limited to those whose, in this case, traumatic brain injury would have to have manifested before age 22, it really takes maybe some creativity or some intentionality around making sure that we've looked at that question, because often people come to our organizations at age 30, or 40, or in this case, this gentleman was in his 50s, and maybe we can trace back that it actually occurred back prior to age 22 and was disabling at that time. And then, of course, the REACH program serves children and adults with, once again, these developmental disabilities, which by definition have to have occurred before age 22. But again, young people with brain injuries are at higher risk of brain injury, but then they're also at higher risk of behaviors and things that cause crises. And this is a program that can be well used to intervene on those issues. So we just want to make sure that everything that's available is being utilized. Okay, next slide. And then the last area really concerns the behavioral health needs of individuals with brain injury, and this would include substance use disorder. So we know that the community service boards are mandated to provide crisis services to individuals with brain injury with substance use disorder. And we know that they're mandated to report on the number of individuals with brain injury that are exhibiting behavior and mental health problems that are either in state hospitals or working already within the community service boards, so that the Appropriations and Senate Finance Committee can get a better handle on how many of them are. See, it's sort of a data issue. But we also know that there have been some delays in implementing these legislative mandates, which we think needs to be addressed. Implementation, of course, is going to necessitate statewide screening for brain injury, so that when somebody arrives in crisis at a community service board, are they screening for brain injury? Probably not so right now, but that's something that needs to be part of serving this constituency. And then also staff trainings. I mean, it's just critical that their case managers, their clinical staff are really well versed in brain injury. They don't need to know it all. They do need to know when a person needs to be referred for other mental health services, perhaps by a more discreet brain injury provider. But anyway, screening and training are going to be important. But when I think about it, we have really robust interagency support that can be provided to the community service boards to develop the screening tools and to provide the training materials. There's just a plethora of opportunity here, and many people who are in the know about these screening tools. Some of you may recall just last year, we reviewed a tool that was developed by UVA and was actually implemented on a trial basis in several community service boards. And the incidence of brain injury was staggering. I mean, it might have been 75%, if I might recall. If I'm off base on that, I apologize, but it was scary. So anyway, there are tools. And so there's no need to recreate the wheel. They're not hard to implement. And there's many trainings. Chris and I have been attending some of them. Wonderful, wonderful trainings that can be used by professionals at these community service boards. So the message, I think, to the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services that oversees these community service boards is they don't need to go it alone here. Again, lots of resources, lots of help available, and I think everybody wants a strong interagency effort in this direction. So next slide, please.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
This is Chris, and I apologize for interrupting. We're keeping an eye on the time because we know that what we need to do next. And your presentation is such a great, it's such a great lead in to talk about the state plan. I'm wondering if you mind if we make sure that if we stop now and take questions. I've looked ahead at your slides, and I know you're going to identify some of the resources like fantastic podcasts by council members and those kinds of things. Can we share your whole PowerPoint with folks, and then that way they'll have those links, and make sure that people have the opportunity now to ask you questions?
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, all I really had left was a conclusion, and it would just be repetitive. So I feel like I've said what I wanted to say today. Thanks for listening.
Oh, it's been fantastic. And do folks have questions or comments for Elizabeth?
This is Sandy Parker. I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Sandra.
Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. I really found that very interesting for me. And probably 10 years ago, I may have been sitting in your office if I had known about you. My son is unfortunately one of our brain injury victims who is placed out of state in a nursing home. And he's been there 13 years now. And going through this entire experience with him has been a very large learning experience for me. And I'm always looking for resources. And now as the family ombudsman, I find you a tremendous resource for people who are just having brain injury enter their life and learning how to, maneuver through all of that entails. So I just want to tell you, I found everything you said very interesting, and I may end up sending you an email with some follow-up questions if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, please do, Sandra. I would welcome that. And I'm sorry this has occurred with your son, and I'm sorry it may have been difficult to navigate the system even 10 years ago. Sometimes it can still be difficult to navigate it right now, and that's what we're trying to address.
Right.
Is getting real early intervention for folks.
Right. And if in my position now, if I can help another mother or family member, father, who just has brain injury enter their life, if I can help guide them, I'll feel like, I've served a greater purpose than just myself. But I do have some ongoing issues, and I may write up a little email and send to you just to see if you may have some feedback. But again, thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Elizabeth, this is John Heath.
Hi, John.
I didn't see or hear anything in your presentation about how brain injury survivors or their caretakers find out about the services you have to offer. Do you do any kind of advertising things? Do you do public service announcements we see plenty of ads on TV for lawyers who are willing to represent people for all kinds of things, but I don't recall seeing anything from your organization, and wondered how you get the word out to people about what services are available.
Sure. Well, thank you, John, for that question. I would say a variety of ways. All of the state agencies know about us and often refer clients to us. All of the facilities, the group homes, assisted living places, they all have our poster on their walls. In fact, they have to post it. So we get hundreds and hundreds of calls every year from people just out in the community that learn about it wherever they happen to be living. We also have an extensive social media campaign that we keep up regularly. One of the services I didn't mention actually was trainings. We do extensive trainings statewide in every sector, whether it's special education, employment, guardianship. We always show up when we can at the Brain Injury Association's annual meetings. So we try and get out there, but I recognize there's a gap in people, and it's unfortunate because, like Sandra's saying, they hear about it, sort of 10 years after the fact. So if anybody can recommend things that we can do to better educate people about our services, I'm really open to it. Also, of course, when people just Google the words disability advocacy or legal concern, disability, our organization comes up. And so for many people, it's kind of a cold call. They've heard about us that way.
This is Monique. I know that the state agencies know about you or should, but not not all of the staff necessarily know about you. And so I wonder if kind of just reaching out to some of those psychiatric facilities for some of those trainings would be very helpful, because as I've said before, we are getting more people with disability, and particularly like IDDD, but also things that are secondary to brain injury. And it does not always seem apparent to me that folks know about the services that you provide, especially when there's difficulty in getting those waivers, because those are really difficult to get. So that might be, one idea to kind of reach out, because also the staff turnover is quite large. So, someone might know about you, and then, that person leaves and it's not on the top of other folks' minds to kind of reach out.
Right.
Just kind of make sure that they know or thinking about you. The other question I had, so you had mentioned, you explained everything so well, thank you. One thing you mentioned was the 504 plan for school. Could you just explain what the 504 plans are?
Oh gosh, where's our DOE person when we need them? I think these are contrasted with formal IEPs or individual education plans. The ADA and the Rehabilitation Act provide for accommodations in a school setting. So, for example, a person with ADHD may not really need an individual education plan, but they may need some things done in the classroom, like being able to sit up closer, or being able to have fewer distractions or things. There are ways to define those plans that I think are a little different from an actual IEP or individualized education plan. I'm not real well versed in special education, but our staff is, so they could better explain that. And if our education person here wants to jump in on that, I'd appreciate that.
Can you repeat the question again, just to make sure I heard it correctly? This is Deborah Johnson. Sorry, this is Deborah Johnson from DOE.
Hi, Deborah, it's Monique. Just exactly what the 504 plans are versus the IEPs.
IEPs, the individual IEPs are the individualized education programs that are federally mandated, I guess you could say. We have federal regulations as well as our local Virginia regulations that govern them. And so the IEP is, well, I take that back. The IEP is also associated with funding. There's funding stream connected with them as well. 504s are not as I guess they're broader in the scope of stuff that they may offer. And that's not the right word, I should say, is broader, but they are plans, individual plans for people with disabilities that kind of outline some accommodations and modifications that a student needs in order to have access to their education. And I'm not as, the 504s to me, I don't know how to explain that. We have a lot more, I guess you could say, regulations and laws in regards to our IEPs than there are with the 504s. And the 504s are more related to ADA rather than to the individual IEPs or the individual student. But for an IEP, a student, many school systems, you go through kind of the same process, evaluation process. Some children can have may wind up with 504 simply because of a recommendation and documentation of a disability and some accommodations that they need, but they don't need specialized instruction, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So
that's a good distinction.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They don't
Thank you,
require
Deborah.
the specialized instruction that they would through an IEP.
Thank you, Deborah and Elizabeth. We're going to appreciate, to me, it's kind of like there's statistics. There's things that we need to get, but maybe we don't need to fully understand right now. And this could be a topic that we come back to later, because we don't spend a lot of time talking about youth and education. But I think, Monique, this is a good time for us to slide into the state plan. It's a great setup around all these topics to turn that over to that committee to start talking about that.
It's good to me. I'm just trying to remember who. I'm pulling up my. I'm sorry. Who's
Ann McDonald.
Okay, thank you. Take it away, Ann.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try not to move too quickly, but facilitate the conversation so that we have some robust conversation. The State Plan Committee has been meeting monthly. We've been identifying purposes and goals, and what we have for you is a draft of a list of possible goal and objective items. So what we want to do today is to discuss our 4 broad goal areas, which are aspirational, as well as specify some objectives for each of those goals areas that are attainable. Our goal areas are those that involve complicated issues and needs, issues related to community supports, plans for education, training, and support, and data. So our hope today is that what we'll be able to do is talk a little bit about how we obtain community input as well. So we'd like you to be prepared to discuss your thoughts on the goal areas, specific objectives, and how we obtain broad community input. There's likely to be things that come to your mind afterwards, and if you have comments you'd like to make after the meeting about anything that we've discussed today, please send them to Donna and she will make sure that we get them out to the committee. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to Kara Meixner, who's going to set the stage for our questions framework.
Okay, wonderful. It's great to be back with you all. We had an internet problem here at my house, so I was on the phone for a few minutes, and good to be back in this space. I was trying to imagine how to facilitate this part just over the phone without seeing you. So we wanted to come up with a method that would allow us to all provide feedback. And as Anne noted, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about each of 4 different goal areas. So we'll talk about needs, we'll talk about community living, we'll talk about education, training, and support, and then we'll talk about data. And in each of those areas, you'll have an opportunity to provide feedback. The question framework, or what we'd like for you to think about when we're going through those areas, are 2 key questions, 2 things that might be in the back of your mind that you would share with us. The first is, when you think about that area, what would you imagine to be better in 5 years? So when you think about that area, what would you imagine to be better in 5 years? The second question that you might ponder is, in that area, what do you feel is the most pressing need? So in that area, what do you feel is the most pressing need? Anne likes to refer to this as what keeps you up at night. So when you think about that area, what keeps you up at night? Or makes you drink more coffee in the morning because you've been up late thinking about it. The other thing that we want to note is we'd really like for you to talk from your lived experience. Some of us are caregivers, providers, survivors, and all of these experiences have value, and we want to give voice and center all of those experiences. So please don't feel like you have to say the right thing, because everything that we say today is the right thing. All right. The last thing that I'll note is that it would be helpful when you unmute yourself to share a comment or a question for you to let us know if you're giving a comment or if you have a question. So if you sort of need us to respond to something before you give your comment. Anne, is there anything else that I should add before segueing back to you?
I can't think of anything, Kara. You know, I will say that in many ways, these are all pressing needs. And it really is important, and it says it right there, you know, to realize that there's only so much that can be done in 5 years. And we'll have to make some hard choices. The brain injury community has for years been plagued with, in a manner of speaking, hysterical enthusiasm, and our eyes are always bigger than our stomach. So we are going to have to focus on those things where we feel like we can make a difference and figure out what we need to focus on first. And these are all difficult conversations and difficult choices, but we're going to work through it together. And in that vein, I'm to lead the discussion about complicated needs. So we have here a bulleted list of the things that we just in our work group identified as some of the complicated needs that we've heard that have been included in the priority letter, that we've read about, that we have data on. Certainly, we've talked quite a bit about not only crisis intervention supports for individuals who are living with brain injury, but a continuum of neurobehavioral services for them. We've talked about behavioral health issues and substance use disorder services and how hard those services are to access for people with brain injuries. Certainly, we're becoming more aware of issues, neurological issues related to the impact of COVID-19. Elizabeth referenced individuals living with brain injuries who become involved in the criminal justice system. And certainly events of the last year have raised our awareness of social justice and health disparity issues. And these are all pretty complicated. So we have a few moments for those brave souls to unmute themselves and give their perspective on these complicated needs. What do you see as being better in 5 years, and what's keeping you up at night?
Well, hi, this is John Heath. If you've been on this council with me for the last 4 or 5 years, you know what I'm going to say. There's one thing missing off this list, and that's the transportation needs of people with brain injuries.
John, transportation is in the next section.
Okay.
And yes, I did know what you were going to say.
This is Sandy. I'll speak up again. Under the bullet of understanding and addressing the impact of COVID, in regards to that, with like my son, and I'm sure the other individuals that live in nursing homes, whereas they can't see their family and they can't have visitors and they can't leave the facilities. They have to stay right where they are. And they're understaffed and their staff are underpaid. And no one is really taking time to make sure those people get to FaceTime or make phone calls to their family. So they're really cut off from everything. And so I think addressing some of the impact of that in regards to brain injury, maybe trying to make them aware of that and maybe set aside a certain day of the week that they allow them to make phone calls to have that contact with their families.
Thank you, Sandy.
Mm-hmm.
I had a question for clarification on that particular issue about the understanding and addressing the impact of COVID. Is this related to what was just mentioned in terms of the impact that it's had on things like social isolation, or are we talking about the impact that COVID may have on the brain itself due to some of the literature we're seeing that it does have what could be long-term effects on brain function?
Yes, both of those. I mean, I think that they're both relevant and both complicated.
Mark, we also talked very briefly in one of our meetings about the impact of COVID on survivors, but also on caregivers, caregiver well-being.
And I have another question, and it may not be for you, maybe it's for somebody else. Can anybody kind of outline for us what crisis intervention support is currently available?
Well, Elizabeth talked about the REACH program, and while that model is exactly for that purpose, individuals with brain injuries sometimes have a lot of difficulty accessing that. I can't tell you what REACH stands for, but it is a community-based model that sends sort of the right people at the right time to folks who are experiencing a mental health crisis. And what we know is that crisis intervention supports for people with brain injuries are not sort of instituted within the system of care for folks that we're talking to. If responders, if there's a 911 call, a lot of times, police officers will show up and they've not necessarily been trained in crisis intervention unless it's a specific crisis intervention team. But the crisis intervention teams don't get any training on brain injuries. And we're trying to change that. BIAV is going to be sitting on the Marcus Alert panel. This was a bill that was passed in the special session of the General Assembly over the summer to deal with how individuals who are in crisis are met with support from trained individuals. So there are a lot of holes in very informal crisis intervention system. A lot of times, individuals who are members of and receiving services through the community-based brain injury programs, that's who does their crisis intervention, if they're lucky enough to get services through those programs. But not everybody is. We got a little over 3,000 people, I think, being served by those programs. And, we have almost 300,000 people disabled as a result of brain injury in Virginia.
So hi, this is Chris. Mark, the fact that you asked the question, if we go back to how Kara kind of set things up, did that jump out as you as something that would keep you up at night for the next 5 years? Or if we come back to the original intent of what we're doing?
No, not necessarily. I think as I look at the bulleted points under this particular topic, personally, I think while this is a very, very timely and relevant one, I do think that there are ones on there that would keep me up a bit longer.
Which ones would keep you up at night?
I think the crisis intervention, kind of piggybacking on what Anne was saying as far as response to crises and the individuals who are responding having understanding and knowledge about the individual they're dealing with and their particular needs. I also think, given that the comorbidity of substance use and behavioral health issues, mental health problems are quite high. The third one there is rises to the top for me as well.
Thank you. Are there other folks that there are things that kind of are would burn a hole in your heart when you're thinking about them and want them to be different in the next 5 years?
This is Barbara.
Go ahead.
Somebody else. Okay. Most of you who know me who have been on this council for any length of time know that the neurobehavioral lack of services in Virginia is near and dear to my heart, and it keeps me awake. And I work with families that are at have members at the out-of-state facility, and it's just, and Anne knows too, we all know that have worked on numerous task force and trying to get the General Assembly and legislators to see the need for such services in Virginia. The problem with this that kind of relates to, I'm jumping ahead to the data section, is trying to get numbers to show support of how great a need this is in the area of neurobehavioral services, not just in the nursing facility setting, but in the community setting, to be able to have enough support in the community with crisis, with, all the programs that are already existent but just aren't enough, It's a whole big issue of having the services available to these people so we can work on discharge from nursing facility settings and get all these services to homes. And the neurobehavioral piece that's such a challenge and a nightmare that keeps me up is that there's not enough professionals in Virginia that in the community that would allow for, say, Sandy's son or any of the others to come back to Virginia and maybe live at home or have a waiver. But even if they could come back at home with a waiver, the only waiver that currently is meeting or has the potential to meet some of those needs is the DD waiver, the developmental disability, because that offers more crisis intervention and more mental health type services than just your regular CCC plus waiver, which was the old elderly and disabled waiver. So
thank you, Barbara. Thank you for, thanks for giving us that great picture. I appreciate that. Nick, were you getting ready to say something?
Yeah, is 5 years right now. Computers is a lot of hassle. A lot of it is alone is all right, is good, is struggle is connection, needed connection, is Wi-Fi, whatever is good. 5, 6 is other folks know computers, is I don't know. A lot of it is 26 years ago. Today, yes, is today. Other folks is 1 year, 2 year, 5 years is limited. Is also is reach out. One is fellowship, is a lot of is other ways is all right. Is find is find person is I don't know. Is yes, is definitely today more is reach out, is talk about it, is a lot of is good stuff today. Good stuff, more good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. I think what I heard you saying was the value of connections, whether it's person to person or through technology, and how important. But it's no good. Neither one of those connections, either technology or person to person, is any good if you don't have access to it, don't know how to use it. It's a great picture for where we might want to go. Before we move on to any other section, are there other people who want to share what's in this particular area? What's keeping you up at night, or what you want to see change in the next 5 years in this complicated needs area?
Well, this is Cindy Jarmel. I just think that several of the needs in this complicated needs section really highlights an area that we discussed last time, as well as the need for continuing partnership with the local community service boards. Because a lot of the things that we're talking about in these sections are covered by the CSB. So.
Gotcha. So if we could make that work in the next 5 years, a lot more doors would open. That would be part of the picture. Cindy, is that accurate?
Yeah, and I'm new to the board. I don't know the whole history on that, but I used to work for a CSB, so I can see where the need for partnership with those agencies is crucial.
Yeah. And, I think the good thing about today is we don't have to know exactly how to fix it. Or you might say, I'm new and I don't know what the history is. That's not important for what we're doing today. As Kara set it up in the very beginning, we're trying to envision where we think that there would be benefit in the next 5 years. So Anne, as we get ready to transition among sections, I'm gonna mute myself and get out of your way.
Well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate your assistance in sort of facilitating some of the conversation. Next up is Victoria Newman, who's going to lead us through a short discussion of some of the issues we identified in community living, including transportation for John Heath.
I'm giggling a little bit, John. I'm with you on the transportation part of it. Well, as Ann and Kara had mentioned, the committee discussed areas with the most pressing needs and which goals would help to promote, access, affordability, and a level of services appropriate for survivors and their families when looking at the community living needs. Looking at areas in the community where needs could be met, we broke the list of goals and objectives into 6 areas. We have housing and supportive services for adults living with brain injury, case management provided across the entire Commonwealth that would help to close a gap there. Peer support for people living with brain injury in state-funded programs and through other formal and informal networks. Vocational and employment services, supports for veterans, and also transportation. From the prior discussion, I noted that some comments actually kind of spill over into this area, including some of the challenges with COVID, that might actually fall into the housing and supportive services for adults living with brain injury, just because there is a bit of a housing crisis, not just among the brain injury community itself, but in America by and large because of COVID. But looking at the Commonwealth and looking at how survivors of brain injury are impacted by lack of affordable housing and just being limited in ways to show their self-determination. This is a very, very big category, along with transportation as far as the community goes, because if you can't get where you need to go or you can't reach the right agency to help you, or that transportation is not available, getting to some of the services are a little harder. And I think that, expansion of case management would help quite a bit. And also the areas of peer support, other organizations and groups, whether they're formal or informal, might be able to help address some of that. So I just wanted to set that up and have everybody consider what achieving some of these objectives would be like in 5 years, and what are the most pressing needs within those categories. So I'll turn the floor over to everyone else.
Hello. So this is Jason. I mean, I could agree with all of these, but the 2 that stand out to me is, first of all, case management provided across the entire Commonwealth. We know there are areas of the state, particularly rural areas of the state, that don't have access to case management yet. And I just think that needs to be a really high priority that everyone in the Commonwealth of Virginia, I think case management is the most flexible support that you can provide someone who needs assistance, and it shouldn't be a factor of where you live, whether you are able to receive that or not. And then, just to hit on John's comment too about transportation, I mean, that is, even in our urban areas, it remains a challenge for our folks to get where they need to go due to transportation barriers. So that's a pretty big need. And the one thing I'll add again about, I know we talked about COVID a little bit in here, but I think all of the programs have had to do a variety of virtual programming since COVID. And what I think we've learned a lot from that. And I think that is a big opportunity for us. It's not going to go away once once COVID, whenever that happens, largely goes away. That to me is going to be one of the lasting positive legacies of COVID, is that we're able to reach people now virtually in manners that we weren't even considering before COVID forced us to do so. And I think that opens up options to serve folks, particularly when you talk about providing case management, and we have jurisdictional breakdowns right now. Maybe that becomes less of an issue now that we have more virtual services coming online. So I'll stop talking. Those are my 2 cents on it.
We've talked about transportation before, and it's a multi-layered issue. But in terms of the state plan, you guys can think about this, but we can't necessarily fix the Medicaid system as part of our brain injury state plan. So how would you see us sort of addressing transportation in a way that supports the needs that we have and is something that we might be able to achieve or attain? And we don't have to have those answers today. You can think about it. What other sort of creative ways might we look at addressing some of the transportation issues? Because we know that they're late if they show up at all, and other disability groups have been trying to tackle this monster for years. So there's things that we can affect as a brain injury community, and things that we can collaborate on with other disability groups to address transportation. So if any of you have any thoughts about that, as you're fixing dinner tonight or sitting on your back deck enjoying a beverage, send those comments to Donna. Anybody want to add anything else in the community living section?
I would just add for the housing and the vocational and employment services for a pressing need.
And I would add that there are a lot of services available now for broadband, Wi-Fi, all kinds of other things for lots of people. That's been a problem for some people with disabilities. And I think this, to kind of piggyback on what Jason said, this is a great opportunity to jump on some of those opportunities. Most of the broadband providers, while they didn't necessarily before, now have programs for people who really need broadband for school or for work or for whatever, and they've piggybacked people with disabilities onto those programs that they have. And so there's a lot of programs available now. I think it's incumbent on us to try to get that word out to the people we're trying to serve, that there are services available, and that here's some of the places they should look into them.
Yeah, I've sort of had this dream that some of these virtual programming and the broadband sort of stuff may help address some of the transportation stuff, but not all. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Kara Meixner right now. She's going to lead a conversation in the education, training, and support category.
Okay, this is our third category. And once again, we want to think a little bit about what would be better in 5 years and what is the most pressing need. So under this category, we have training and support for family caregivers. We also have workforce development for survivors. We have education, training, and support around concussion / mild brain injury. So that might be in the schools, in the community, etc. And then also to increase general public awareness of brain injury and resources for specific groups. So this might range from individuals who live with brain injury to caregivers and all sorts of different kinds of providers. Cindy had referenced the CSBs, for instance. There's also domestic violence, police and sheriff's departments, EMS and first responders, and healthcare providers. Working with the educational system, with children, with parents of children. Another area is prevention. And then finally, we noted some educational campaigns around brain injury, not just as kind of one singular injury, but as a chronic condition that spans the lifetime. So we'll go ahead and open up the floor for what you might hope to be better or what you think is the most pressing need.
I'd like to add just a quick clarifying statement. Workforce development in this category is not just for persons with brain injuries to find jobs. It's also how we prepare a workforce to work with people with brain injuries. You know, what do we need to do better to educate doctors or psychologists or other, therapists, those sorts of things. How do we draw people into this profession as well? So I just wanted to clarify that that's a very broad sort of workforce development category. Curious to hear what you have to say.
Hi, this is Kara Beatty, and I just thank you, Anne, I agree with what Anne just said, trying to bring more people into this field. I also wanted to just point out, I think something really pressing is to increase in public awareness of brain injury and resources, and just getting education. As a healthcare provider, it's always very surprising to me when I have somebody that comes in that's gone through the appropriate routes to get treatment, but have never had things actually like explained to them or educated on just some of the, I don't know, like the presentation, like Brain Injury 101. I think that you or Jason have done that before. And it's just, it boggles my mind how they've gone through so many people. And then they're like, you're the first person that has explained this. Granted, I know for me, part of it is because it's something that I lived. It's something that I continue to struggle with. But I would just really, really like to see more of my colleagues being able to educate.
Mm-hmm.
This is Kevin Kojal. Kara, I wanted to piggyback off of your point, and I had a chance to reach out to. I work with our Centers for Independent Living here in Virginia, and I had a chance to reach out and ask, for their input on some of these questions, and received some comments back from some staff and one intern actually at a center that is a brain injury survivor, and they mentioned similar things, Kara, to what you have just said, and also in particular highlighted a need for physicians and therapists to raise awareness about the needs for people like physical therapists. So I just wanted to put that comment in, and I'd be happy to send these to the group, if that would be helpful.
That would be great, Kevin. I love that idea. And thank you for doing that. That was a terrific outreach effort.
Hi, this is Victoria. actually, looking at the list, these are a couple of things that have been keeping me up late at night for the past 10 years, actually. It's the public health awareness of brain injury as a chronic condition. And, I will just tell you, throughout my journey, there's just still misconceptions, even when being treated for traumatic brain injury, that, some folks are still on the, well, you'll get better in, 6 months, or, when are you going to, did you stop having your headaches yet? So it's like trying to put deadlines sometimes on this. And because my traumatic brain injury has resulted in a permanent disability, there's a big challenge for a person like myself to try to help dispel, some of the myths and misconceptions about what a brain injury looks like, or, how it affects someone. And so I was looking at the public health awareness along with some of the challenges individuals like myself have with a mild brain injury. It may not be apparent to someone just, looking at you, or even through treatment, that they can really glean that some of the challenges with daily living, can be, just as significant. So I think that those two areas are very, very good. And then the last thing I wanted to mention about education and workforce development. Again, I've encountered just some misconceptions about, what a brain injury is and how to accommodate people. I actually continued to work, like holding on to my job, like right after the injury, and, worked with, rehab about, just making adjustments. But many of the misconceptions about what it is and what it isn't just caused my own situation to kind of spiral into my job just not giving me any of the accommodations that, were recommended, because for whatever reason, it was just something that, they just weren't going to do. And so I just wonder how many other folks may have the same type of experience, or challenges that are really key to trying to move on and adjust and, become resilient. Some of these obstacles in these areas make it difficult, but, I'm very optimistic that being more specific about brain injury being a chronic condition, I think will help dispel, some of the myths about, what it is. It's not just a concussion.
Thank you, Victoria. This is Monique. I'm being mindful that I have not done a very important part of my job today, which is to make sure we're keeping track of our time. And so I see we still have some stuff to chat about in terms of the data. And so while I hate to do this, I'm just going to ask if folks in giving our feedback are just mindful of maybe giving kind of, here's what I support for this, or if you have questions, just in the interest of time. And I apologize for not being more mindful of this moving, a little bit ago, so that I wasn't asking folks to be succinct now. Sorry, guys.
Monique, one of the things that I've been thinking about is, it's late on a Friday and we've had a lot of information given to us, and I think everybody's probably tired. And one of the things that I think the committee can talk about is perhaps sending out a survey to the members of the council and giving them some space to write comments and looking at those results later on. So, this is an interactive exercise, and if we can't get it all done today, we'll figure out some other ways that may enhance some of the ways that we receive feedback. The last area that we have to go over is data. And, you know, we've been talking about this data issue for many, many years in the Brain Injury Council. And, you know, when we talk about data, we have a couple of different issues that we're trying to address. We're trying to improve or address data issues related to sharing information across agencies. How do we do that? What might it result in? How do we use some of the data that we have to identify gaps in services in both a qualitative and a quantitative way? And how do we use the data that we have through the statewide trauma registry, through the BIAV database, through the information that state-funded programs are collecting, or other databases that we may have access to, including the Model Systems database, or something that Virginia has, which is an all claims payer database. This is a voluntary submission of information about insurance claims across the state of Virginia. And how do we use that data? For what? For our advocacy work, for program development, to evaluate the services that we are providing. So if anybody has a few thoughts to share in the data front, I'd like to hear those at this time. Going once?
I scared everyone. I feel bad.
Well, you know, it's
I
late. I recognize that.
I have one quick thought on this.
Yes, Mark.
And I'm not sure where it is. Not sure where it is with COVID and everything, but there is a push, as some of you know, for a statewide health record for most of the state agencies who are providing care and treatment. A lot of that's being handled legislatively. One thing that would be helpful is if we're going to have an almost universal EHR, if some work was done to make sure that brain injury screening was included in that universal EHR. And if brain injury screening was included in that, you would have data sharing among most of your state agencies about it in short order.
I love that idea.
And it's a lot of, that would probably, given what I know of the project so far, is that it's expensive and there's a lot of money involved. A lot of this has been handled through the legislature. So inclusion of an EHR in the EHR for brain injury screen may be a legislative initiative.
And EHR stands for Electronic Health Record. That's what Mark is referring to.
You're right. I'm sorry, I went all acronym. Yes, Electronic Health Record.
We're all trying to get used to that. All right, I'm going to turn it over to George, who's going to bring us home with talking about our future plans for broader community input.
All right, thanks, Ann. I'm going to keep this very brief. Donna, can you let me share my screen briefly? Sorry, because I did not send this to you earlier.
I'm sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. I don't know that I can. Chris, am I able to do that?
You can, because George is a state employee.
Okay, so the captioner has to leave at 4, so we're going to have to wrap this up by 4.
I'll give 2 minutes. I just want to have it visual. So.
I just have to find your name. Done.
Thanks. Okay. Somebody give me a thumbs up. You can see this. Yes, great. Okay. So you've heard about the content of the plan, proposed content, but what I'm going to just share with you very briefly is that a critical part of this is getting input from all stakeholders. So of course, starting with the council and then hitting other key stakeholders and consumers and providers throughout the Commonwealth. So there's a number of different ways we can do this, and we'll probably use a mix. And I think Anne's point about sending out a survey after this to get your thoughts would be most helpful. So I'm just going to explain each one very quickly. One is putting out a survey and asking folks to respond, and then doing marketing around the survey so people are aware of it. Paper surveys could be made available for people receiving services, and the brain injury programs or other key stakeholders could help them complete those surveys so that we hear from the people that are receiving services around brain injury. Another way is to receive open-ended feedback from identified key stakeholders. So that's kind of targeted conversations with perhaps the brain injury programs and other key stakeholders. We can also do solicitations through our social media, and this kind of works back to the survey that we can help raise the profile of that. We could also hold virtual town halls. So that would be a way of getting broader community input. And also listening sessions that could be more like focus groups that are hosted specifically by a few key stakeholders, namely a couple of, maybe 2 or 3 of the brain injury programs, particularly those who are in less well-served areas. So those are some things that we'd like you to think about, ways that we can include broader community input into the plan. And if you have other ideas, we would love to hear those, but we'll send this out with the post-meeting materials so that you can comment. Thank you.
Nicely done, George. I think that was under 2 minutes.
Excellent.
All right.
So we do unfortunately have to clock off in the next 2 minutes. You will, as always, get your post-meeting survey just to get so that we can get your feedback on this meeting. But as George and Ann have indicated, there'll probably be some follow-up requests for feedback from the state plan committee after they next meet. And we have some goodbyes and some welcomes, but I think we're going to go ahead and save those for the April meeting. So Monique, I'm going to turn it over to you to wrap things up.
All right. Motion to adjourn today's meeting. Anyone?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Deborah Johnson.
Thank you, guys. All right. So we will see you all in April. Thank you, everyone, for all your amazing comments. This was great. And I will see you guys soon. Have a good weekend.
Take care.
See you, Monique. See you, everyone.
Bye.